When you hear America and Iran today, you probably think of conflict, right? Sanctions, hostility, a relationship that's been on ice for decades. But what if I told you that's only half the story? What if I told you that before all of this, these two nations weren't just talking, they were actually close, strategic allies? Yeah, you heard that right. Close allies. It's a pretty shocking turnaround. So what on earth happened? How did a partnership that seemed so solid completely and utterly fall apart? Well, in this explainer, we're going to pull back the curtain on this whole geopolitical mystery, and our story starts right after World War II. All right, so picture this. World War II is over, but the Cold War is just heating up. The United States is scrambling, looking for partners to help contain the Soviet Union, and it finds one in a really, really strategic place: Iran. And look, this wasn't just some casual friendship. This was serious business. It actually started back during the war, at the Tehran Conference, where the U.S. made a promise to guarantee Iran's independence. Then, get this, by 1957, under the Atoms for Peace program, America literally gives Iran its very first nuclear reactor. And by 1972, you've got President Nixon visiting Tehran, sealing the deal on a major strategic alliance. You see, here's the bottom line. For Washington, Iran, under the rule of the Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, was the perfect ally. I mean, it had this massive border with the Soviet Union, it was swimming in oil, and its leader was fiercely anti-communist. The U.S. saw Iran as a pillar of security and a super volatile part of the world. And to really understand just how solid this relationship looked from the outside, just listen to this. It's New Year's Eve, 1978. President Jimmy Carter is giving a toast to the Shah, and he calls Iran an island of stability. What he had no idea about was that this island was about to be swallowed whole by a revolutionary tidal wave, a wave that was fueled by resentment that had been quietly building for decades. And to understand that resentment, we have to rewind the clock. Go back 25 years before that toast to one single event that basically poisoned the well for generations. For many, many Iranians, this was the moment of ultimate betrayal. So, meet Mohammad Mossadegh. In 1951, he was the democratically elected and wildly popular prime minister of Iran. And he did something huge. He nationalized Iran's oil industry. For decades, it had been controlled by the British, but Mossadegh said, nope, this belongs to the Iranian people. For Iranians, this was an incredible moment of national pride. Well, Britain was absolutely furious. They fought back with a brutal oil embargo. And this is right where those Cold War fears kicked in. Washington started getting nervous. Could a weakened Iran fall into the hands of the Soviets? That fear led directly to something called Operation Ajax, a secret mission where the CIA and Britain's MI6 organized a coup, overthrew Iran's democratic government, and put the Shah right back in power. Now, this is what's so wild about this moment in history. It's one event seen in two completely opposite ways. From the U.S. perspective, the coup was a win. It was a covert victory that kept the oil flowing and kept a key ally out of the Soviet camp. But from the Iranian perspective, it was a national trauma. A foreign power had just reached in and crushed their democracy, all for oil. That single act in 1953 didn't just end a government. It planted a deep, deep seed of mistrust. And that seed would grow for the next 25 years, watered by the policies of the very man America had put back on the throne. After the coup, the Shah's rule just got more and more autocratic. He had his feared secret police, the Savak, to crush anyone who spoke out. And all the while, he was being propped up by billions and billions of dollars in U.S. military and economic aid. So, in the eyes of more and more Iranians, from religious leaders to students, the United States wasn't just a friend of the Shah. It was complicit in their oppression. And then finally, in 1979, all that simmering anger just boiled over. Millions of Iranians poured into the streets. It was a full-blown revolution, led by an exiled cleric, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. The Shah was forced to flee the country, the monarchy was gone, and the Islamic Republic of Iran was born. So the revolution happened, the Shah was out, but the relationship with America, while totally shattered, wasn't completely dead. Not yet. That would change with one single dramatic event that became the absolute point of no return. November 4th, 1979. Remember this date. It's the day that would redefine the U.S.-Iran relationship for the next half-century, and probably more. Because on that day, Something started that would last for this many days, 444. It was the number of days that 52 Americans were held captive, right inside their own embassy. It became known, of course, as the Iran hostage crisis. So what triggered it? Well, the U.S. had just allowed the exiled and terminally ill Shah into the country for cancer treatment. For the revolutionary students back in Iran, this set off major alarm bells. They were terrified it was a repeat of 1953, a setup for another CIA plot to put the Shah back in power. So to stop it, they stormed the U.S. embassy. The fallout was immediate, and it was seismic. First, diplomatic ties were completely cut. Then, the U.S. froze billions of dollars in Iranian assets. And finally, it launched the very first wave of economic sanctions that, in one form or another, continue to this day. The friendship wasn't just over, it was buried under layers and layers of animosity. Eventually, the hostages were freed, but the wounds from 1953 and 1979, they never really healed. Instead, they hardened into this legacy of deep, profound mistrust that has shaped every single interaction ever since. And that mistrust has basically defined the decades since. It's created this constant cycle of confrontation. I mean, just look at this timeline. In '84, the U.S. puts Iran on its list of state sponsors of terrorism. In 2002, President Bush calls it part of the axis of evil. We get this brief moment of hope in 2015 with the Iran nuclear deal, but that falls apart just a few years later when the U.S. pulls out and slaps harsh sanctions right back on. So where does that leave us today? Well, with two totally competing stories, you can see them laid out right here. Iran officially sees the U.S. as this oppressive power trying to dominate the world. The U.S. points to Iran's nuclear program, its human rights record, and its funding of proxy groups. But both of these official stories are built on that deep historical foundation of mistrust we've just walked through. So when you look back at it all, you can see the critical moments. That coup in 1953, the revolution in 1979, that pushed these two nations from being partners to being bitter rivals. And it leaves us with one last, really big question. Was all of this rivalry inevitable? Or could history, at any one of those turning points, have taken a totally different path?
If this helped you understand better, hit like, share it, and subscribe for more simple breakdowns.